society that was so uniform and there was no differences of opinions, that even though they had a great sense of security and harmony, they were not growing. And so this was what actually made us decide that fallen beings would be allowed to embody on the planet to upset the apple cart and get people out of this state of virtually being asleep, spiritually speaking. And so there are still many people that are like this, and if you could say that the conspiracy theories and the fake news have a beneficial effect, it will be that it is sometimes the only way that these people can be awakened from their coma. And suddenly there is something that is so outrageous that there is a reaction. And there is a possibility that by them reacting so strongly, they can gradually be awakened. There's also a possibility that they go into what Mother Mary described of being addicted to this kind of reaction, and therefore they go into a dead end. But that is the case anytime there is a growth to a new level. So, what you have, and I have addressed this before, for example in my book on poverty, is that the fallen beings are always seeking to manipulate the situation. And the way they have done it now for thousands and thousands of years is by, they have created this philosophy of lack. And this was because there came a point where they had been instrumental in lowering the collective consciousness, densifying matter to the point where there was lack at the physical level. There were limited resources, and therefore it was relatively easy for the fallen beings to spread this philosophy of lack. And this you can see all up to the modern age, where you see this philosophy such as the concept of limits to growth that was spread around in an earlier decades. And so you have this entire philosophy that everything is limited, and there will come a point where we run out of resources, whether it's oil or something else. But I have addressed this before, that you may run out of a particular resource, but you will not run out of resources. You will not run out of energy. So, it is simply an artificial construct. And it is, in a way, the last-ditch attempt of the fallen beings to save the consciousness of lack. Now they are using the environment, whether it's global warming, whether it's running out of resources, whether it's overpopulation, and all of these things, to say that the earth is inherently limited, and therefore there is an absolute limit that you cannot go beyond. But as I say in my book on poverty, this is a complete fabrication, because even though oil is an important resource right now, I have other forms of energy that I'm already ready to release when the consciousness is raised to a sufficient level that will make oil completely obsolete. And there will come a time where people will look back at the present age and all the technology based on oil and think it is as primitive as you now consider an ox cart. And it will be obvious to people in that future, which is not necessarily so far away, that this was a very, very limited technology. And they will be amazed that people could be so attached to oil-based technology and think that this was the only form of energy and the only way to drive machinery. They will be totally amazed that this consciousness could have such a hold on people for so long, despite all the other technological progress that you have seen in the last 100 years. And so, it is completely unnecessary to even speculate about traveling to another planet physically, colonizing other planets. Completely unnecessary. This planet is designed to hold 10 billion life streams that can all grow towards Christhood and have enough physical resources once we go to a higher level of the collective consciousness. And so the physical future on Earth is that there will come a point within decades, hopefully within just a few decades, where we will have the release of what I have previously called technology that is not force-based. And once you start shifting the collective consciousness to accepting this kind of technology, the consciousness of lack will simply fade away, because people will begin to accept the possibility that there is unlimited energy resources, and therefore there really are no limits to growth. It is right now the main obstacle is, as I've said before, the main obstacle to the golden age, to the manifestation of the golden age, is that people cannot accept it. They cannot accept it as a possibility. And the reality is that you have already seen technology that is not force-based. The emphasis on green technology, whether it's solar cells or wind power, is an example. But there is, of course, much more advanced technology. But what has been brought forth so far is the technology that people can actually accept, that they can accept that this can work. You will see that the fallen beings have a major propaganda effort to prevent people from accepting the concept of free energy. This is the essence of non-force-based technology. Force-based technology says you have a technological device, you must put something into it to get something out of it. This is force-based technology, the essence of force-based technology. But what are you putting into a solar cell? Well, sunlight, yes, but are you producing it here on Earth? Nay. What are you putting into the windmill? Do you drive the wind? No. So you see that there is already technology that gives you energy without you, human beings, having to put anything into. So why is it so difficult to switch and realize there are other such forms of technology? And when the consciousness is raised enough, these technologies will be released, and there will come that point where you know that you have all of the energy you could ever need. Why are the fallen ones creating this consciousness of lack? Well, partly because they can control you through it, but also because they can profit from it. What, my beloved, is the one sentence they always give you about capitalism? Supply and demand. Well, the only way for a capitalist to conceive of making really big money is to have a monopoly on the supply of a certain good, so that he can charge almost any price he wants. The other way to conceive of it, making big money, is that you can restrict supply so that there's a lack of a certain resource, and therefore people are willing to either pay more for it or to even pay for it. The situation you have today, where people are programmed to think that they have to pay for energy, is a completely artificial situation created by the fallen beings. There will come a future, not so distant, in the golden age, where people will not even dream of paying money for energy, because they have shifted to the point where they realize that energy should be free. So that people are free to do whatever they want with it. There will come a point in the golden age, my beloved, where you can live on earth without having to pay any big corporation or any state money to just exist. How artificial is it that in order to simply exist, you have to pay money to the state, to these various big energy corporations and other companies. There will come a point where Your basic physical survival is given to you for free. And this means that people cannot exploit you by forcing you to pay for the necessities of life. I am sort of getting ahead of myself because one of the topics I wish to talk about at this conference is exploitation. So this is a glimpse of the physical future on earth. And again, you need to decide where do you focus your attention. And if you are an Ascended Master student, focus on the manifestation of the golden age. Don't focus on the problems. You know, you have the old saying, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Well, to a certain degree, being part of the solution means that you are not focusing your attention on the problems to the extent that you are giving them energy that magnifies the problem. You are focusing on the solution. You are focusing on raising consciousness, both your own and the collective. That is the way to look at the future, and I can assure you that the future of this planet is much brighter than the vast majority of the people can accept. But I would like you, who are my direct students, to accept it and to shift into this positive expectation of the future. And sure, there may be some events that will be disturbing, because, as we have said, you cannot override the free will of the majority of the people, and they may have to experience some drastic conditions in order to awaken. But you can choose not to let this take you off the path of focusing on the positive and focusing on manifesting the golden age. Yeah? Okay.
I'm getting emotional, sorry. Lately, I'll try to talk anyway.
Yeah.
Lately, I've tried, when I have a reaction from, let's call it my ego, like a judgment, or I distance myself from people, I usually used to look at that very critical. So trying to work it out of my system, not being able to let it be there. And lately I've tried looking at my reactions with more compassion or even love. And I've noticed some kind of release, or being able to shift more into the perspective of my higher self maybe. But because it's so new, I still need to know, is this not also an avoiding of my psychological strategies?
Okay. Mother Mary? Well, my beloved, you need to go through certain phases. And so there is a phase where you start becoming more aware of your emotional reactions, but you still haven't resolved the psychological issue that causes the reaction. And so it is valid to go through a period where you seek to pull your attention away from the emotions. You seek to step away from feeling it so personal. And therefore you can seek to gain the perspective of your I Am Presence or an Ascended Master on this. Now you need to understand here that the ego can misinterpret anything. You could say, for example, that if you take my dictation from last year, that most problems people have, most conflict between people are petty problems. Then you could apply that and say that I'm telling people to just ignore all problems. But this is, of course, not what I'm saying, and certainly not at the personal level. But it's valid to shift out of taking it so seriously, being so burdened by it emotionally. And if seeing it from the perspective of your I Am Presence helps you, then that is positive. But of course, you need to be aware that ultimately, in order to be free of these issues in your psychology, you need to look at them. You need to heal a wound, you need to transform the energy, and you need to come to the point where you see the deeper belief you have about yourself that causes you to go into this reaction again and again. And so what you are doing is fine as long as you don't see it as the ultimate step, and of course don't let it stop you from looking deeper into the mechanism for why you react a certain way, or even why you have been so critical of yourself, why you feel that need to put yourself down or to judge yourself very harshly. This tendency to judge yourself is always put upon you by the fallen beings, by the dark forces, by your ego, and it is completely artificial. It is also in many places in the collective consciousness and put upon you maybe by family members or other people. Sometimes in a bizarre way they have no evil intent, but they think that in order to function in society you have to behave a certain way, and the only way to keep you within the boundaries of what they consider normal, you have to judge yourself and constantly evaluate your behavior. So many places, in many cultures, they have this very judgmental attitude towards everyone, and everyone is brought up to have it towards themselves. And you need to look at this and realize that it is not natural, it is not coming from your Iron Presence or the Ascended Masters, and you need to decide, is it something you want to carry with you for the rest of your life? And if you don't, we have given you many teachings and tools on how to overcome it. If you use the teachings we have given, even my teachings on the cosmic burst trauma and the magnificent teaching you received today from the Presence of Love, you can make major progress on this, but we have also given many other teachings that can help you. Birthday boy had a
Thank you. Question. So I was concerned about this, that when I look at my psychology, is it possible at some cases that there's actually nothing to look for, but that I'm actually like forcing myself to see it, and so I might imagine it and make it up?
Okay, Anna Mary? It truly is amazing what the human ego and the outer mind can do. And you need to be aware of this, that your outer mind will not simply lie down and die because you have found an Ascended Master teaching and you have started working on your psychology. It is very, very true that when you go into the process of starting to look at yourself, starting to look at your psychology, you are making genuine progress by seeing issues that are there. But your ego, perhaps even some dark forces, will try to project into your mind that there's more problems. In fact, as this messenger realized a few years ago, there is an aspect of the outer mind, of the mental body, that we could call the problem solver. You could look at it as if it's a program on your subconscious computer or on your physical computer. A program that is designed with one purpose, to solve problems. The problem with the problem solver is that he has become so clever that he realizes that when you're walking the spiritual path and resolving your psychological issues, there will come a point where he's out of work. And he doesn't want to be out of work, so instead of just solving problems, then he goes into actually creating problems and projecting that these are real problems that you have to solve. And so there's obviously a level of the path where you don't have to worry about this, because you have real problems and issues from past lives that you need to solve. And you need to resolve these things and work on it. But it is true that there does come a point on the path to Christhood where you need to step up to a higher level of discernment, and you then need to recognize that there is an aspect of your mind that will project that you have a problem. And why does it do this? Well, we have said before that we give you the concept of a spiritual path, but that there comes a point where this concept can become a hindrance to your growth. Because what does a spiritual path imply? It implies that you are at a certain level and you need to go to a higher level. So there's a distance between where you are now and where you ideally should be. And as long as you think there is a distance, there is a distance. You have not arrived. But there can come a point on the path to Christhood, and in fact, there are many of these points where you need to consciously acknowledge that you have attained a certain level of Christhood. Because you need to consciously make the decision to dismiss the illusion that there's still a distance between where you are and where you should be. This doesn't mean you have attained full Christhood, but it is important for you to have these steps on the path where you recognize you have reached a certain level, and now there's a certain issue that you no longer put your attention on. And the problem solver in your mind will gladly project that you are not there yet. There's another problem you have to solve. There's another issue you have to solve. There's this other very, very distant past lifetime where you had this traumatic experience that you need to deal with. And so, this is a very good observation. It's a very good point to come to. But when I give a teaching about this, I know that there's always a certain group of people that are hearing this for the first time, and they are always worrying, how do I now tell the difference between the real psychological issues and the fake ones? Because so far I have felt secure in thinking that anything that came up in my psychology was a real problem that I had to deal with. And now I'm hearing that there are fake issues. So, what am I going to do now? And the reality of this is that if you are reading or hearing this teaching and it hasn't come to you from within yourself, then don't focus attention on it. Still go on the working assumption that every problem that comes to you is something you need to deal with. When you feel that it comes from inside of yourself, this awareness that perhaps this is not a real issue, then you start asking for our help to have the discernment. And we will help you as much as we can. It is a continual challenge for us on the spiritual path that we are trying to teach students from a broad range of consciousness. And so we need to give certain teachings for people at a certain level of consciousness, but we also give higher teachings for people at a higher level. And of course, these are also valid for those at a lower level when they come to that level. But there are sometimes people at the lower levels, they take a teaching that is really not for their level, and they become very focused on it with the outer mind. And it is sometimes because they want to be more advanced than they are. And it creates great confusion for them. And so, when I say that there comes a point on your path where you need to basically ignore the concept of a path and allow yourself to accept that you've arrived, well, most people do not have to worry about this. But it is a valid teaching that at some point, if you are not aware of it, you can keep projecting that you are not where you need to be, and therefore you never dare to express your Christhood at a certain level because you think you are not there. As we have said before, the Greek philosopher who said that you first have to go to the halfway point and then to the halfway point between that and your destination, and therefore you never arrive because you can always divide the distance into smaller and smaller increments. And this is what the ego will attempt to do when you have reached a certain level of the path and you no longer have these issues that it can use to manipulate you. Then it will attempt to project into your mind that there's still more issues, still more subtle issues that you need to deal with. And there does come a point where you need to consciously look at a certain issue and say, no, I'm not putting my attention on this. Is it subtle, my beloved, to determine whether something is real or not? Yes, it is. Does the past become more subtle as you go higher? Yes, it does. But you also increase your ability to discern, and you increase your ability to sense when there is a lower intention from some part of your being. You increase your ability to sense when there is no ego-based intention in you. There is no ego-based reaction. You simply feel that here's something that attracts your attention, and when it does, you know it's real. When you feel the ego-based attempt to manipulate you into a strong reaction, then you can dismiss it and say, "Get thee behind me, Satan," because it's trying to pull you into some reaction. But again, this is a teaching for the higher levels of the path. But it is an important teaching, and it is an important distinction to make, that not all psychological issues are real. Now we need to add to this that there also comes a point on the higher levels of the path where you are no longer resolving personal issues that you have, but you are resolving issues from the collective consciousness, or perhaps a group of people. And at this point, you are taking on an issue, and the issue is real, and it needs to be resolved by you, but you can learn to discern that this is not actually a personal issue you have. It is something you have taken on. And therefore you can avoid taking it so personally, taking it so seriously, but it is real, and you cannot just dismiss it. Well, you can, but it is not the ultimate reaction, because you are helping to resolve something for the collective and for other people. I know, my beloved, that some of you will again react to this by feeling even more confused. And I'm asking you to therefore be very, very mature in the way you look at this. And you develop perhaps another approach to our teachings, where you recognize, as we have said, there are so many issues in the world that you cannot focus on all of them. And you also begin to recognize that we have given very vast teachings, even through this messenger, but also through other messengers, and that there is too much for any person to focus on all of it. And therefore, you develop this sort of selectiveness where you tune into your heart, you feel what is important for you now. Then you focus on that. And you do not focus on the other things. It's not that you deny them or ignore them, but you are open to the fact that there can come a point where suddenly, from within, you feel that now it is time to focus on something else. And then you just do that. But you do not put yourself in this state of mind where you become so over-eager to be a good student that you feel you have to read every book, you have to give every invocation, you have to be aware of every issue we bring to your attention. Because you need to recognize that, first of all, we often speak to the collective consciousness, but also we have a vast student body, and we foresee an even greater student body in the future. So we are bringing forth teachings for many different groups of people, many different levels of consciousness. And therefore, you need to tune in to where you are at, what is important for you, and you focus on that, and you do not feel bad about not doing everything, focusing on everything, studying everything. You just rejoice in having found the path of the Ascended Masters. You rejoice in being at the level you are at, and doing what is important for you at that level. Yeah, I don't know if we need a break or if we're done.
It's well, we have dinner at 1700 hours, so we have some time still.
Okay, but I don't know.
But maybe, yeah.
Yeah, if you have more questions. But you asked one before. Did you ask one before?
No.
I have one.
Okay. Well, first you, then.
Yes, so my question is, there are beliefs in the subconscious mind that we are not aware and they affect our lives often. So how can we better bridge the gap between the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, bigger the conscious level of awareness?
Okay, Mother Mary. If you use our teachings the way we intend, study the books, practice some of the invocations that appeal to you, then you are already in the process of doing that. But you need to be aware that you cannot see everything in your subconscious mind all at once because it becomes overwhelming. It becomes too much. And so there are always some students that they want to see it all at once. And it's, in a sense, it's understandable and commendable. And we are in no way seeking to discourage people, but you have to be balanced. You have to recognize that you are not meant to see everything in your subconscious mind all at once. You see it in pieces, you see it in increments. It's a function of the fact that you forget your previous lives is an opportunity whereby you are not so overwhelmed. Think about this, my beloved. If you have had hundreds of lifetimes on a very dark and violet planet like this, you could have been exposed to many, many things in past lives. And if you were taking with you from lifetime to lifetime the conscious awareness of what has happened in the past, you would come